Recording, mic check, 1 2 1 2. Hello, welcome to the shed. My name is Jamie, and as a full-grown man, I now get to enjoy the wonderful world of dark and damp spaces. Now, recently I bought the DJI Air2s to use as an addition to my love of landscape photography, and after a few weeks of use, was it a worthwhile purchase? And if so, how good is it really for taking photos? That is the big question. Just to point out there straight away, this review is not about the video capability, because as we all know, the 10-bit T-Log, whatever you want to call it, is very, very good. But this review is not about video, it's about photos, specifically landscape photos. So anything I mention in this video is in reference to that use case scenario. Without further ado then, let's get into it. So I guess let's start with a bit of context. I have been going out, adventuring out, if I dare say, taking landscape photos for some years now. And over those years, I've slowly upgraded my equipment to the point where I'm used to, dare I say, an extremely high quality of image. You know, I'm not top notch, but I'm, you know, reaching up there. Of course, there's no way I'm expecting that same quality that I'm used to come from this little drone here. But the only thing it can do that I can't do already is fly. And with that ability to fly, it can take images from angles that otherwise I could never really do. So ultimately, that is the reason I bought this drone. The interesting question though is, how big or small is that gap from what I'm used to? Let's look at that. Now, before I get into the actual image quality, which is probably the reason you clicked on this, there is another important angle of this review I do need to kind of mention, bring to your attention. Now, part of the decision buying process that goes through my head anyway, with buying any equipment, is not only the value it adds, but will I realistically use it? And having briefly used the older Phantom drones, I decided straight away they weren't for me. They weren't worth the hassle. You know, they were big, they were bulky. Carrying it in a special box, you know, it took ages to set up and get flying. So there was just so many steps and so many hurdles to get through to get the thing in the air and actually get what you wanted to get. So I just, you know, I don't want to know. This bad boy, on the other hand, the DJI Air2s, and, you know, all the recent drones, has a lot working in its favour, so that those hurdles are no longer in the way. You know, 0 to picture is a quick and easy transition, basically. Why? Super portable, 595 grams, and, you know, really nice tiny size, super quick to set up, and you're in the air in less than a minute. Flying the thing as well, super easy to use, picked it up within minutes really, how to fly the thing. And because of these things, this drone makes it impossible basically to not have in your camera bag. Even if you're gonna do like longer hikes, you're gonna go up the top of a mountain where weight becomes a factor, still wanna take it with me rather than them old terrible Phantom drones. Also to note, the quality of the finish on the drone, the controller, very, very good. Really like it. Really nice. Really well put together. Can't fault it. And also to note, I bought the Fly More pack with, you know, extra batteries, ND filters, all them accessories, battery charger, and definitely worth getting, because you're going to need at least more than one battery. You're going to need multiple batteries, and the Fly More pack combo, whatever you want to call it, is really good value just for the batteries alone. Now, what about the photo quality? This is what it really comes down to. How good are the pictures on this little thing here? Now, compared to the previous versions, apart from the Mavic 2 Pro, which I'll touch on later, the sensor has had a massive upgrade, which at the end of the day is going to result in much better images, and that is what we're living for, isn't it? 1-inch sensor. Most people taking landscape photos who are serious about it, well, they're using full frame, aren't they? To put this in kind of some perspective, the 1-inch sensor has an area of 116 millimeters squared compared to the full frame, which is 856 millimeters squared, which is 7.4 times bigger. Does that mean that the quality is 7.4 times less as good as this though? Well, we'll come on to that. 20 megapixels. That is, I would say, the minimum acceptable resolution for landscapes. We're not used to that really. Most photographers now are used to, you know, 42, 60, dare I mention, but it's still very acceptable megapixel resolution. It really is. Now, one thing that's not really mentioned in a lot of places, but I think should be kind of publicised more, is about the bit depth. Not a video. Everyone's talking about video bit depth. I'm talking about photo bit depth. This 1-inch sensor, I can't find it anywhere, but it's likely 12-bit. Really, you want what a full frame sensor has like this with the Sony A7R III, which is 14-bit, and that makes a massive difference to do with dynamic range. It really does. You really need 14-bit to really maximise that dynamic range with an image, but you know, there are ways around it. You can bracket your shots and, you know, HDR doodaddy, and you can make up for that shortfall. I'll link a description to a good article that goes into the differences between 12-bit, 14-bit RAW images, and also up here, I think I'll link it, a link to my review comparing the Sony A6000 and the A7R II, which goes into those bit depth differences. So check them out. It's very interesting. Now, an interesting thing here when it comes to the raw images from this little drone is that the raw images aren't unadulterated raw images. DJI uses, let's look at it, temporal denoising technology on the raw files. So they're not the pure raw files that we would like. They have tinkered with them a little bit, and really, even after doing like HDR stacks and things like blending images together, I can still see noise. So I don't know how bad it is to begin with. Sharpness, well, I mean, it's a little lens and it's decently sharp. Let's have a look at a few test images I did on the lens chart there. Okay, so here we have my lovely lens chart. ISO 100, f2.8, 1/60th of a second, 8mm, which, as we know, is the equivalent of f8, ISO 800, and 22mm on the full frame camera. So zooming in 100%, looks pretty clean, nice sharp edges, picking up all the lines quite well. I really can't complain. Let's get right in there. 400% to the point where we're seeing the pixels, individual pixels. I don't know how it's coming across on YouTube, but there's a smattering of noise, the very lightest bit of noise. This isn't pure black. I can see speckles of white. Now going over to the corner, what's the corner sharpness like? 400%. It's pretty darn good, I'd say. It's resolving all these little lines here, resolving the numbers. Looks nice and sharp. Definitely fantastic. Now what we have here is ISO 100 through to 12,800, and it's going to be a bit interesting when we look down to here, I've discovered. But anyway, let's zoom in on 100%. 100 looks great. 200, 400, I could see noise creeping in. 800 a bit more obvious, and it's 1600 onwards kind of gets very, very obvious. And then down here, 6400 and 12,800. I don't know if you noticed, but there's like other circles, other pictures appearing. You see, it's like it's taken extra pictures and then tried to overlay them to help remove some noise. This might be the temporal noise reduction that was mentioned. 300%, and we can see, look, that really emphasizes how ISO is affecting the image. To this point, 12,800 looks barely recognizable. It really does look bad. Oh, by the way, the reason that these slowly turn green is because I was trying to keep shutter speed and everything the same throughout, and I was just adjusting the ambient light. But as the ambient light went down, there's green lights on the drone that were flashing, and so that's what's being picked up in these images down here. So looking at 12,800 a bit more, can you see how it's kind of taken multiple images, I would even say 3, and it's tried to overlap them, but done it really, really badly. Now, had they overlapped properly, maybe the noise would be a lot better than it is here. Just very interesting observation, that one. We need to just take another detour, talk here for a second about equivalency. What do I mean by that? Well, it's easy to misunderstand the information given to us by the manufacturer. For example, this drone has an aperture of f2.8, but that is not the same as f2.8 on a full-frame camera. No, 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 no. We need to apply some conversions to truly compare apples to apples, or oranges to oranges, cameras to cameras equivalency. 1-inch sensor, crop factor of 2.72 times when compared to the full-frame camera. So this 8mm lens on the drone is equivalent to the focal length on the full frame of 22mm, which, you know, I would say that is a nice field of view. It's wide, but it's not too wide so that you get distortion or that fisheye look. So it gives it a more natural, you know, kind of look to the, you know, the panoramic kind of view. Anyway, I like it. I think it's pretty good. We mentioned the aperture, fixed aperture f2.8, which in 35mm, you know, terms equivalency is f8. Did that shock you? Did you think, wow, that is a lot? I didn't realise that was such a bump. Well, there you go. Now, they aren't the only things affected. ISO is also affected, this time being 7.4 times the equivalent. So shooting at ISO 100 on the drone is ISO 800 on the full frame big bad boy camera. And that might sound terrible when put in that perspective, but really ISO 800 on a full frame is still very clean, very good for modern sensors. So that isn't the worst thing in the world. So essentially, let's connect all this equivalency together. This here is the same as shooting ISO 800 at f8 at 22mm. So I took a few quick images with the full frame, and I thought, let's just compare and see how really the difference is between full frame and the drone camera. Comparing here is against a full frame camera. Now, I don't have a 22mm lens, I have a 24, which is the closest lens I have. So this is with the Sony A7III, which is 24 megapixels, so slightly higher megapixel count, a slightly narrower field of view, but it'll give us a good idea. We are at ISO 800, and again, all sharpening and noise reduction is off. Let's have a look down here, 200%. It looks fairly similar, really. It's performing just as well, I'd say. And looking at the corners, it is sharper on the full frame, but this is the Sony 24mm G Master, which is going to have excellent sharpness. So this is our gold standard, really, and we're really not far off it with a touch more noise. So I would say that's extremely good for a little 1-inch sensor. And now just quickly, I'm comparing the full frame at ISO 50 against the ISO 100 of the drone. And you can see, really, we're not far away. It is really nicely resolving the lines. The noise is well controlled. It just looks really, really good for a little 1-inch sensor on a flying drone. I'm really impressed. Okay, let's talk about that other camera, the other flying drone, 1-inch one, the Mavic 2 Pro. I mentioned it earlier, and as far as I know, at this moment in time, it's the only other option out there for a drone with a 1-inch sensor. Compared to that of the Air2s, the Air2s is about 300 grams lighter. It's a couple of centimetres smaller, and it's importantly cheaper, £500 cheaper than the Mavic 2. There are additions over the Air2s that the Mavic 2 Pro has. We think of the changeable aperture and the Hasselblad colour science, and for specific use cases, they can be very useful, but really, they're just not features I'm fussed about when it comes to landscape photography in particular. For me, this was a no-brainer to go for the Air2s over the Mavic 2 Pro. And, you know, that money I saved I could put to better use, like travelling somewhere, if I'm allowed to, dare I say. We can look at numbers and comparisons all day long, but really what it comes down to is the real world use. That's what actually matters, doesn't it? So here's a few images I've taken with the Air2s, and have a little looky for yourself. Now, really, the best test is when it comes to printing the image out. Now, here is one I took from Ross Bay a few weeks ago, and really printing covers a lot of sins when it comes to the noise and artifacting that you can see when you know, your pixel peeping on the computer. It just helps blend all the noise in. Same with the artifacting. Really love this shot. I did bracket this exposure, that helped reduce the noise. Super happy with this, and more than proud of this one to hang on the wall, if I do say so myself. Now, there's enough of that. Conclusion. Now, keep in mind, unless you've got a pretty penny in the bank, you cannot fly your full-frame camera into the sky. And 10 years ago, no one would even be taking any pictures in the air unless you get in a plane or a helicopter. So we have come a long way in a short time. And remember, that first DJI drone, that horrible Phantom, came out in 2013, and the first one didn't even have a camera. So we are light years ahead of 8 years ago. Blimey. Being honest, we're never going to expect the same quality image that we get from the full-frame camera, but I'm going to say we're about 80% of the way there. It's pretty darn good, I would say, for this little monkey here. I've loved using it. It really brings in a unique view of a landscape, and for that, I'm more than happy with the quality of the images I get from this drone. To summarise then, in the context of portability, quality, ease of use, and importantly price, the DJI Air2s is an amazing flying camera, in my humble opinion. Thanks for watching, and a reminder, please do not subscribe or like this video, as I want as few people to see it as possible, please. And only put negative comments down below, please. Thank you very much. Signing out from the shed. Ciao for now.